Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Bunnysays. This is my introduction to to my Let's Play of Deathtrap Dungeon in the Fighting Fantasy Classic series. That's a series by Steve Jackson and Ian Livingstone. It's based upon the old Choose Your Own Adventure Fighting Fantasy game books. At the end of this introduction, I'll be reading the history, as it is here, of the Fighting Fantasy series. It's about 20 minutes long, and if you don't feel like listening to it, you could certainly bypass it. You won't miss anything. And I'll be telling you when it's coming, so you could just skip ahead if you'd like. But this part is the introduction. I just wanted to tell you about the series itself. Now, when I was a kid, I used to read these books that are based upon books that were Choose Your Own Adventure books. If you don't know what those are books where you would read something and then you come to a part in the story where it'll say, if you choose to take the high road, go to page 53, or if you take the low road, go to page 106 or something like that. Now, these were a little more advanced. In this case, in these books, they had a fighting style to it. It was a fighting system to it. So if you encountered monsters, you would roll dice, or in the back of the book they had a blank page with numbers on it, pre-printed numbers, and you could just, if you didn't have any dice on you, you could just put your finger on the page somewhere. Close your eyes, put your finger down, and take the number, and use that as your roll. And you would, according to certain stats and stuff like that, you would have that you pre-rolled, that you would roll at the beginning of the story. You would, it would have there was a quick sort of fight system to it. So you could literally, roll dice and pretend you were having combat with monsters in the game. So I loved them I read them when I was a kid, and these are some of the ones that I read. Like these here are some of these titles that I read: The Warlock of Firetop Mountain, The Citadel of Chaos, Deathtrap Dungeon, City of Thieves. Now this series just came out. Yeah, it's a free series that comes with Blood Bones. You can download it and play Blood Bones for free. And you pay for the rest of the books. And they're only about $2.99, or at least I picked them up for $2.99. I think they're $3.99. They're on sale for $2.99. Of course, depends upon when you listen to this. They might be on sale or something. But I picked up City of Thieves and Deathtrap Dungeon because I remember them being really fun. I remember I read these as a kid, so I don't remember what they are. But the Citadel of Chaos, I think I remember liking this a lot, so I think I might pick that up as well. But again, now when these came out, I had read nothing like them. They were surprising to me. So, and I began reading all of them. I began picking up all of them. I think they were like $2 at a time, or $2 a book or something. And boy, did I have fun. I really liked the first, 25, 30 of them. And then there was another series that came out afterwards. So it was a little even more involved, a little more adult, called Lone Wolf series. And I loved that series too. That was great. I really liked that series. That was great. Yeah, I still have a few of them. I think I might actually have the Warlock of Firetop Mountain somewhere in a box there. I'm not actually sure. But I have really fond memories of these. Yeah, and I wanted to do a Let's Play of these since the first second I saw them. Now, I want to quickly describe the Let's Play itself. There'll be a lot of reading since they're based on books. There will certainly be a lot of reading, and the combat is based in the game itself. It's rolled by the computer and everything for you. So there was a lot of reading, and if you want to listen to this Let's Play, you'll hear a lot of that. I'll be reading all the parts, and I think this will be a good thing to listen to quietly in the background as you're doing something else, homework or something like that. And I'll attempt to, make it nice and not too quiet, but quiet. And keep the series, keep the reading at a nice pace. And you'll hear me, I'll describe things, so you won't have to worry about seeing what's going on. Like if I roll a dice, I'll tell you what I rolled, and that type of thing. So, other than that, I usually do an intro for all my series like this, and it's a nice way to sort of relax into the series, relax into the Let's Play itself, and just smooth your way into it. And this way you're going to taste of my voice too, because I know certain people have different tastes in voices, and they like hearing what they like to hear, and I know it's personal opinion. And I'm not sure, you can never know what kind of voice somebody is going to like. So at least this way you get to hear my voice ahead of time without worrying about getting into the series itself. So other than that, I wanted to tell you just quickly that there's right after this I'm doing the history. I already read the rules in the main. I went over the rules in the first episode. Now, the first episode is really a prolonged introduction. I read through the rules. I go through the beginning of the intro. I read the intro to the series, to the story Deathtrap Dungeon and everything. And then I stop at the part where you just start to begin. So, and that'll be in the second part. That's when the main story starts, But I just wanted to quickly introduce this and tell you how it is and what it is about. I know not everybody knows what it's like and what these are. So some people, I'm sure some of you might, but some of you might have no idea. I don't know how well these sell nowadays. They were really popular back then, but in the 80s and 90s. But I have no idea if people are buying them now. But I really enjoyed them. And I thought this would be a chance to practice my voice a little bit and to exercise my vocal cords and do all that good type of thing and try to keep my voice loose. And now I'm not a voice actor or anything like that. I'm not going to do voices. I'm not going to do different. I'm not going to bore you with weird voices and stuff like that. I can't do them anyway. But this is a way for me to practice and keep my voice, to keep my throat regularly exercised, really. As I think I might have problems with it. And I won't go into that, but this is a thing I would like to do. To me, I enjoy reading. That's a big thing for me, and I thought it'd be nice if you could just sit back, relax, and listen to me reading the story of what's going on. And, you could have fun listening to me play, so. Anyway, let me get on to the history, and you could enjoy that if you want to. If not, just go to the next, just go right on to the next file. You won't miss anything, so. I'm going to combine this with I already read the history part. I'm going to combine it with that and put them together. So, my name is Bunnysays. Thank you for joining me. I hope you continue on. I hope you enjoy the way this is done. And I hope you enjoyed it. I'm doing Deathtrap Dungeon first, and I might do City of Thieves and then Bloodbones later. But I hope you like it. So, if you want to, keep going into the next file and enjoy. Okay, here we are in the game. Is the opening page of the game, and you can go down and you can see the rules and history and We're going to start reading the history. Okay, fighting fantasy. The year was 1982, and the UK, like every year during the 80s, was filled with the good, the bad, and the downright ugly. The Young Ones and Knight Rider hit TV screens for the first time. Prince William was born, and the Falklands War began and ended. Come On Eileen was the biggest selling single of the year, and Dealy Boppers and Leg Warmers were the latest fashion craze. But most significantly, for thousands of preteens, August 1982 saw the publication of a brand new type of book, one in which you were the hero. Part novel, part role-playing game, The Warlock of Firetop Mountain was the first title in the Fighting Fantasy game book series. Final Fantasy is a different series. Okay. The authors Steve Jackson and Ian Livingstone were not new to the gaming world. They first met at Altrincham Grammar School in 1967, and 7 years later shared a flat in London. Altrincham? Alright, okay. In early 1975, they founded Games Workshop with another old-school friend, John Peake, the intention being to create innovative new games to sell by mail order. Okay, again, here are the two guys. They're holding up the old original Dungeons & Dragons manuals. These are real old school ones. Their first big break came when a copy of Dungeons & Dragons, a unique role-playing game, was sent to them by its creator, Gary Gygax, for a review in their fanzine, Owl and Weasel. Steve and Ian were convinced they discovered a gaming revolution, and set about securing an exclusive 3-year European distribution agreement from TSR Hobbies, the publishers of D&D. This was soon followed by various deals to distribute other fledgling role-playing games. John wasn't keen on this change of direction. Again, John Peake. John wasn't keen on this change of direction to fantasy gaming and left Games Workshop mid-1975. That's too bad. Ian and Steve remained convinced that fantasy role-playing and interactive entertainment was the future and went full-time. In 1977, they began publishing White Dwarf magazine. As an aside, I used to buy that. Not in 1977. I was a little kid in 1977, but later. And in 1978, opened the first Games Workshop retail outlet in Hammersmith, London, as well as manufacturing Citadel miniatures. In 1980, Games Workshop held its annual Games Day exhibition at the Royal Horticultural Halls in London. The publisher, Penguin Books, had taken a stand to promote a new book called Playing Politics. Steve and Ian got talking to the book's editor, Geraldine Cook. She became interested in the idea of a how-to-do-it book on the whole fantasy role-playing craze. The meeting ended with them being invited to send in a synopsis. Steve and Ian began to discuss what exactly the book would contain, but they soon went off the idea of a technical manual, and their approach began to change. What if you could actually play this book yourself, just as if you were taking part in a solo role-playing game? Using the provisional title, The Magic Quest, the two of them began to think about how exactly the book would work. Key to the concept was the ability for the reader to make choices which would lead to a branching of the narrative at various points in the adventure. The problem was to present choices in such a way that readers would never really know how far into the adventure they were, or what was coming next. This problem was solved by breaking up the text into dumber paragraphs, and then jumbling them up. For example, the choice of going east or west at the end of paragraph 1 would mean turning to either paragraph 71 or 278. The manuscript would actually be written sequentially. Each paragraph would be set on a separate page and mixed up later. Once the adventure was written, playtested and balanced. Rather like writing a computer program flowchart, Steve and Ian had to keep a careful record of all monsters, items, objects, coins, spells, potions, armor, weapons, clues, etc. They could be found during the quest to make sure that A, it was actually possible to get through the adventure, and B, it was possible to adjust the balance of the adventure to make it easier or harder where required. By early 1981, a draft of the first gamebook-style story was finished, and Steve and Ian sent it eagerly to Geraldine at Penguin for her opinion. Her first question was whether it was a book for adults or for children. Steve and Ian felt it was for both, but this was in the days before the now ubiquitous crossover book, and Penguin would have to decide whether to publish it on their adult list or through their children's imprint, Puffin Books. The deciding factor proved to be the Puffin Book Club, which ran through schools across the country. Tony Lacey, head of Puffin at the time, felt sure that the sales potential of the Magic Quest would be much higher if aimed at 9 to 12-year-olds. Perhaps surprisingly, Penguin actually sat on the book's proposal for over 6 months before making a formal offer. During this time, Steve and Ian's frustrations grew. At one point, Steve even sent a synopsis to Allen and Unwin, publishers of The Lord of the Rings, but they politely declined to take the project any further. When the book was finally commissioned by Penguin, the two authors had only 6 months to complete the text, at a time when Games Workshop was continuing to take up more and more of their time. But in August 1981, they finally began work on their first title in the series that was to change their lives forever. To save time, Steve and Ian agreed to write half of the adventure each. The midpoint where the two halves would join was planned to be a single crossing over a river. Ian wrote the adventure up to this point, and Steve thereafter. The basic premise of the book was a dungeon-based treasure hunt quest set deep inside the cavernous Firetop Mountain, home to the powerful warlock Zagor. The title was changed from The Anodyne, The Magic Quest, to The Warlock of Firetop Mountain, a title more in keeping with the established fantasy of the Lord of the Rings and Dungeons and Dragons, prompted by Puffin for something that helped explain the book further. And to allow for related books, future books if needed. Ian came up with the ingenious series name, Fighting Fantasy, something that promised readers combat in a world of monsters and magic. If Steve and Ian thought the job was done once they delivered the complete manuscript, they were sadly wrong. The book's editor, Philippa Dickinson, diplomatically pointed out various inconsistencies in the two halves of the adventure, including their separately drafted rules. Okay, just as an aside, I have no idea why they would do that. Why would why did they not talk to each other? And then, according to this, they're separately drafted rules. Now, so they sent the book in with, and they didn't come together to each other and say, hey, this is what I got, this is what you have. Let's take a look, and our rules are different, that type of thing. So I don't know. I don't know why they did that. I mean, it sounds like they didn't even look at each other's drafts. Anyway, the two authors had agreed on the 3 basic attributes of the adventurer, reflecting their fighting ability, constitution, and fitness, and how naturally lucky they were, but had labeled them differently. Steve's skill, stamina, and luck versus Ian's combat factor, strength factor, and luck factor. And there were differences in how these were to be determined. The adventure sheet, where the hero's details and possessions were recorded, went through various drafts too before Ian hit upon the final layout that was to be used, including the use of monster encounter boxes. Another problem had been solved. The combat system was going to be critical to Fighting Fantasy's success. This was what was going to make the book a role-playing game rather than just a narrative-only choose-your-own-adventure. Again, 2 slightly different versions were offered, and again Philippa had strong views in these. Steve had both the player and monster striking together, always using 2 dice. Ian had them taking it in turns, with some combats involving 3 dice. Steve sometimes stipulated the number of rounds that must be fought. Ian didn't. The final system was an inspired design, elegance itself. It proved to be one of the many things that would set Fighting Fantasy apart from the various clone series that were to appear later. By the way, if I keep calling it Final Fantasy, I'm sorry. Artwork, for both the cover and the internal illustrations, was another area in which Fighting Fantasy was set the standard. Steve and Ian's experience at Games Workshop made them convinced that these had to be darkly gothic rather than the soft, tame illustrations which were the norm for children's fantasy adventures at this time. They convinced Puffin to use the same artist they had used for White Dwarf, and the rich graphic detail to be found in the works of artists like Ian McCraig, Martin McKenna, Jim Burns, and John Blanche became the hallmark of Fighting Fantasy, giving it its uniquely powerful visual appeal. Meanwhile, Philippa made some crucial observations in the text. For example, choices were presented in various ways, and the format should be consistent. There was a werewolf and a wolfman, which was confusing, so one had to go. And the first draft included a song that was copyright protected. But most serious of all was the obvious change in writing styles at the halfway point. In the days of typewritten text, this just couldn't be changed easily. So Steve volunteered to rewrite Ian's half of the adventure, having drafted the original outline and sample for the book. The second draft sorted all these hiccups out, and the book was scheduled for publication in August 1982. Puffin was initially cautious about sales, and for the first few weeks, this seemed justified. But fueled by articles running Games Workshop's White Dwarf magazine, and with exposure in schools through the Puffin Book Club, word quickly spread. By the end of the year, the book had been reprinted 5 times. Puffin realized they needed new titles, and fast. Steve immediately began writing Citadel of Chaos, and Ian, Forest of Doom. Any difference in writing styles would no longer be an issue if the two authors penned their own books. In March 1983, the 3 titles were topping the Sunday Times bestseller charts. The fighting fantasy phenomenon had well and truly arrived. With success inevitably came the critics. An outspoken member of the Evangelical Alliance described the books as the work of Satan and demanded that they be banned. Frequently asked by the media whether stories of swords, sorcery, and demons were suitable for a children's publisher like Puffin, editorial director Liz Attenborough did a valiant job of defending the honor of Fighting Fantasy. This was in the days before Philippa Pullman's His Dark Materials, Harry Potter, and Darren Shan. They really should have. They were supposed to. They probably should have italicized some of that. But for every critic, there was also a supporter. Teachers, for example, reported how the books had been extremely successful in getting teenage boys to read, particularly those classified as reluctant readers. With the 6th title, Deathtrap Dungeon, in 1984, selling over 300,000 copies in the UK alone in less than a year, the series continued to grow apace, and other writers were drafted to keep up with the demand for 6 game books a year. That's a lot of game books. That's a lot of books. That's one every other month. And 300,000 copies is nothing to sneeze at either, by the way. That's actually a lot. Among these recruits was Marc Gascoigne, Fighting Fantasy's most prolific talent and subsequent series editor. Fighting Fantasy began to expand beyond its original format into novels, magazines, board games, manuals, and even computer games. There seemed no end to people's appetites. In late 1983, Penguin published the first book in Steve's epic Sorcery series. By the way, I have that, and it's great. I had it, I read it, I did it at the time. It was a really intricate and big series. It was like a really in-depth series. The Shamotanti Hills, I remember that. That was the first book. Okay, spanning 4 books, this series added a unique spellcasting system and allowed for an extended adventuring campaign. The reader could choose to play a warrior or wizard, with their character able to develop through each book and continue to the next. Yeah, they were expensive too, I remember, because these books were like $2.50 or $2 or something like that, and these sorcery books were like $6 or $7 or something. They were expensive at the time. By the end of the 1980s, there were 40 fighting fantasy titles, and production began to slow. It was due to stop with a 50th title, Return to Firetop Mountain, written by Ian, but sales were boosted by this revisit to the location of the very first book, and Puffin published a further 9 titles. Okay, well, all right. I didn't realize there were this many. When the 59th book, Curse of the Mummy, was published in 1995, the series had sold over 15 million copies worldwide. Now that's a lot. During the 1980s, fighting fantasy was probably responsible for bringing more people into the world of fantasy gaming than any other vehicle, and had made household names of Ian Livingstone and Steve Jackson around the world. In 2001, Icon Books was keen to enter the children's book market. Its publishing manager, Simon Flynn, had been a huge fan of fighting fantasy, and felt that children of the new millennium would lap up the books if only they knew they existed. When was this again? 2001. Right. It was the perfect series with which to launch their new children's imprint, Wizard Books. After much hunting, he managed to track down Steve's email address, and a deal was struck with Steve and Ian at Joe Allen's restaurant in Covent Garden, London. Always the Gamers, the final advance for each book was decided by a game of spoof, which Steve and Ian won. That's great. So, in June 2002, Wizard Books began republishing the series, in a fresh, if different order, with The Warlock of Firetop Mountain, Citadel of Chaos, Deathtrap Dungeon, and Creature of Havoc as the first 4 titles. Dave Holt, a long-term fan, was asked to set up the series' official website, www.fightingfantasy.com, and the site's fan club, the Adventurers Guild. 2003 and 2004 saw a TV advertising campaign, and the series had once again become firmly established in the hearts and minds of children. Well, that's great. I didn't even know about that, actually. In 2005, the first brand new book for 10 years was published. Written by Ian, Eye of the Dragon played on the strengths of the original series. Oh wow, I really gotta get a hold of this. The 60th book, Puffin had originally commissioned over 12 years earlier, Bloodbones, and which enjoyed an almost mythical status within the original series community, was finally published in 2006. It was written by fighting fantasy stalwart John Green, who went on to write 3 more titles in the series: Howl of the Werewolf, Stormslayer, and Night of the Necromancer. By the way, I'd just like to add, those are great titles. Howl of the Stormslayer. Wow, that sounds great. Night of the Necromancer. Those all sound good. I really like to check those out. Okay. August 2012 saw publication of Blood of the Zombies, written by Ian to mark the 30th anniversary of The Warlock of Firetop Mountain. Having worked for 20 years in the video game industry, Ian was aware of the everlasting appeal of zombie slaying. He was also aware of the need to create a very challenging quest with fast-paced combat action. He succeeded, with a tough-scoring Eurogamer.net giving it a 9 out of 10 in their review, saying, "It's surprisingly swift and exciting, with the hectic, minute-to-minute battling and health management beats of Left 4 Dead and a real sense of the old-school RPG." I'll have to check that out. If I could find it. What is it called? Blood of the Zombies. Okay. Now in the digital age, fighting fantasy comes to smartphones and tablets thanks to Tin Man games. So, fighting fantasy is still very much alive and kicking over 30 years on. May its stamina never fail. And of course, you go back to the main menu. As you can see, you can look at the books here again. The Warlock of Firetop Mountain, Citadel of Chaos, The First of Doom. The ones I have right now are Sea of Thieves and Deathtrap Dungeon. and they start you off. Now, by the way, you start off with blood bones for free, and then you buy the City of Thieves and Deathtrap. You buy each of these for $2.99 or $3.99. They're on sale for $2.99 each. And you buy them, separately. Each one is like DLC, sort of, and they unlock basically. There's Island of the Lizard King, and of course, Caverns on the Snow Witch. And there's the rules and the history. So, anyway, thank you again for joining me, and I hope this was enlightening to some degree. And again, this is a way for you to hear my voice and get an idea of what's going to go on and how it's going to work. So please continue on into the main series and check it out. So thank you for now. Bunnysays, goodbye, and hope you join me again.